Uh, it's a it's a pleasure to have you all joining us for this enriching experience that promises to expand our horizons and empower our minds. Today, we have the honor of introducing our esteemed speaker, Shri Prem Anosh. He wears multiple hats: a content creator, a heart to heart podcaster, an engaging host, and a skilled website manager. His unique gift lies in simplifying intricate concepts with utmost clarity, offering a breath of fresh air in our often most complicated world. With a journey that began in Chennai, led him to excel at the Sri Sathya Sai Institute of Higher Learning. Sri Anush holds a BSc degree in chemistry from Vrindavan and an MSc degree from Prashanti Nilayam. His academic achievements are complemented with his involvement with Sri Sathya Sai Media Center since 2011, where he effortlessly connects with audience during live shows and contributes to the website team, showcasing his prowess in digital communication. Sri Anush's influence extends globally, having shared his insights in countries like New Zealand, Australia, and Nepal. Seamlessly weaving spirituality in the modern world, he is a beacon of effective business communication. His dedication to personal growth, holistic well being perfectly aligns with his academic accomplishments and refined communication skills. During these interactions, we encourage all of you to have your videos on so Sir can see you and interact with you. And if you have any queries, please do put it in the chat box so he can answer them. And if there's any of you who would like to ask any questions, and if you want to interact with him personally, you can raise your hand and someone from the IT team will be unmuting you so you can talk to Sir directly. And so without further ado, let's get over to Sir and let's begin. I request everyone to put on their videos.
Saram, I place my loving salutations at the lotus feet of my master, Bhagwan Shri Sathya Sai Baba. Whatever I speak today is his words of wisdom. I don't have anything of my own to share with all of you. So I place my gratitude at his feet where it truly belongs. And a very warm good afternoon to all of you. It's so wonderful to be with all of you here, and it's my pleasure. Thank you for that very warm and, uh, should I say, exaggerated introduction. And I think what came across was your kindness. Thank you so much for that. I'm going to begin with a story. It's actually if I could call it so, it's a stupid story, right? And the message in it comes across because it's a stupid story. And all through this talk, what I'm going to try to do is bring out a lot of little stories and analogies which are spread across the way the scriptures, this ancient land has given us, especially the Upanishads, right? One of the beautiful things about these Upanishads is they draw from stories and experiences from our everyday life. And they kind of show us things that we are missing, which are right in plain sight. It's happening before us, but we miss it. And through these stories and through these parables and analogies, what they're trying to do is making us look within. I think that's the most important thing. So through this interaction, through this session, if you are not able to follow anything that I say, please feel free to stop me. Feel free to raise your hand. And if you want me to repeat anything that I've said, I'm more than happy to. So coming back to the story that I was telling you, the story goes that in those days, to give you a background, we used to have this Gurukula system, right, in ancient India, where young students would be sent away to the Guru's ashram, which would typically be in the outskirts of a city, deep in the forest. So they would spend a good few years in the Guru's ashram, right, before they return back home. So there was this Gurukula where there were these students who were all undergoing their studies. So towards the end of their course, they all wanted to return home. So they went back to the Guru and they said, there were about 10 of them. They said, we want to go back home. The Guru was a bit concerned because it was a time when there was torrential rainfall, and the river on the banks of which this Gurukula was constructed was in spate. So the Guru was worried. He said, the weather is not too good. Do you really want to travel at such a time? So one of the seniors in that group, he said that I will take responsibility to ensure that everybody reaches home safely. So the Guru says, all right, and gives them the responsibility, tells them make sure that everyone reaches home. They go to the river. And at one particular point, when they had to cross the river, they find that the river is, the stream is flowing too swiftly, and it was not very advisable to cross this river. So they decide that the 10 of them will hold their hands and slowly cross the river at one place where they thought the river was not too deep. So as they're doing this, suddenly the currents become too strong, and before they could realize, they find that, sorry, did someone raise their hand? Did I miss that? Okay, I'll continue. If anything, you can please put it on the chat and we'll address that. So they're crossing this river and suddenly the current becomes too strong, and before long, they're not able to hold hands with each other. They drift away, and with a great difficulty, they swim across and reach the other bank of the river. So having reached there, this boy who had taken responsibility, the leader of that group, he said, let's just check if everybody has come across. So he makes everybody stand in a line, and he starts counting, to ensure that all 10 of them have come. And when he counts, he's able to find only 9 people there. And he's shocked. He says, oh my God, one person is missing. So he repeats this counting again and again and again, makes them stand in different orders, counts. And every time he counts, he's only able to count 9 people. And he's wondering, where is that one person? Oh my God, we have lost one of our brothers. He's been washed away in the current. Hope he's safe, hope he has come alive, and hope he is, at least on the other side of the bank, if not on this side. But nonetheless, they're all very worried. They run around the whole place looking for this one classmate of theirs who is lost. And when this is going on, an elderly man who is walking by comes there and sees this group in utter confusion and asks them what is wrong. So this boy, who's the leader of the group, comes and says, this is what has happened. We've lost one of our mates. Immediately, the elderly man understands what's gone wrong. So he makes them again stand in a line, with the one who's the leader of the group being the last one in the line. And this leader is thinking that, it's a waste of time. I've done this counting any number of times, and why is this old man trying to count again? So then he starts counting 1, 2, 3. And finally, when he comes to the leader of the group, he says 10 and tells him that you are the 10th man. You are the 10th man who is missing. So this story is actually a very famous one in Vedanta. It's called Finding the 10th Man. Before I move on, would anybody would like to brave an answer as to what are they trying to convey in the story? And as I prefixed, it's really a stupid story. I don't think any of us in a situation like that would do the mistake that man was doing. But what is it that this story is actually trying to convey to us? What is it? What does it mean to find the 10th man? Anyone has any thoughts on that? Anybody? I mean, there are no wrong answers. So if anybody would like to. Yes, I think someone's raising their hand. Aman?
It
Yes,
is
Prat.
conveying it is conveying the message that while in a panic mode, we have to control ourselves.
Okay, while in a panic mode, you have to control yourself. Yes, I think the Purushottam. Yes.
Thank you, sir.
Yes. I think,
Couple of answers on chat. One,
okay,
Ankit says answer is
in
in
you, and you have
you
to
have to
find
find yourself.
yourself.
Yourself is important, says
Yep.
Lorian.
Okay, so there are some answers here, and I think most of you get it, right? The point is, I'm sure all of you in this call are pursuing some form of education or something, right? You're studying some subject. I studied chemistry. Some of you must be studying history. Some of you must be studying business and commerce. All of what we do in the name of pursuing education or learning is to learn something that is outside of us, which is quite useful, right? If it is not useful, we wouldn't be spending so much time on it. But we are neglecting the study of one thing that is most important in all of this. And that study or that question is yourself, right? The whole idea of that, who's the 10th man, is we keep counting and counting and counting, but we don't count ourselves, right? There's a beautiful quote by Alexander Pope. I think many of you might have heard it in any of the sessions that you've already had. Of course, Swami also was very fond of recalling this statement. The proper study of mankind is man. Now, it's a very interesting statement. The proper study of mankind is man. The meaning of that statement is we study a lot of things, as I said, so many subjects. We give ourselves to the study of objects, plants, animals, the stars. But the one thing that is most relevant to study, most important to pay attention to, is your own self. And if we do not understand who we are or what the whole idea behind life is, it's pretty messed up, to say the least, right? Imagine you buy an interesting gadget, right? You buy whatever. I mean, I'm not going to name a gadget which is known to us. Let's say something which is new in the market. You bought it. Imagine you have used that gadget for many months and a few years, and a couple of days before you're going to discard that gadget, you suddenly wonder, what is this meant for? And you look around for the user manual, and then you read, what was this actually created for? How absurd would that be, right? Most of us tend to do this because we put away the study of our own selves. We put away the study of philosophy for post-retirement. You need to understand, we all need to understand what this life is for when we are actually leading our life, when we have much of our life ahead of us. Instead of trying to figure out what this life was meant for, when you have absolutely no time left, really. Right? So it is for that, I think each one of you can congratulate yourself that you have come to a point where you're at least wondering, I'm beginning a career, I'm beginning my life. What am I meant to do with this life? Right? Because it's a very, very important question to ask. You may not find an answer in this weekend or the next weekend or for the next few years. I have not found mine completely. But it's really a worthwhile question to ask. In fact, the answer to it may never be found so easily. But in the quest for this answer, I think you will figure out a lot of things. Going back to stories from the Upanishads, there is another beautiful story. I always like to go back to that. It's a story of a father and a son. So there is the son who's about 10, 11 years old. He's whiling away his time in play. So the father wonders that, I should ensure that this boy doesn't lose track in life. He has to do something about his life. So he takes him and puts him under a guru. At the age of 12, the boy's name is Shvetaketu. The father is Uddalaka, that's his father's name, and Uddalaka takes his son Shvetaketu and puts him under the care of a guru. So those days, just like how you have standard 1 to 12, they used to have 12 years of learning in a Gurukula. So this 12-year-old boy spends 12 years of his life under the tutelage of this guru, comes back as a 24-year-old young man. He went there as a playful kid, but he comes back as an arrogant young man because he's learned so much, he has mastered so much. So he comes back to his father as a very haughty young man who has learned so much. So the father looks at him and he realizes that, no, I've ensured that he doesn't while away his time, but now I should ensure that whatever he has learned is directed in the right direction. So he looks at his son and asks him, what did you learn in these 12 years? So the son says, I learned the grammar, I learned this, I learned astrology, astronomy, and all of that. He just starts listing out. So the father asks a very interesting question. And most of you must have heard something similar to this in this beautiful movie called Kung Fu Panda. How many of you watched that? Right, the story of the dragon scroll, and they say that, you read the dragon scroll, you can hear sounds that you have not heard, you can see things that you've missed. The father Uddalaka actually tells something like that. Have you learnt that by learning which you can hear the unheard sounds? Have you learned that by learning which the subtle secrets will be revealed to you? And then the son is surprised. He says, what is this? My teacher never taught me anything like that. And then he starts telling, gives a very beautiful analogy, very wonderful analogy. He says, see, there are many, many types of pots in this world. There are big pots, small pots, round ones, tall ones, some in the form of a plate, some in the form of a bottle. If you study clay, you understand all the pots. And then the father asks the son, have you studied that by knowing which you can know everything? The son is really surprised. He said, what is that? I have not learned that. My teacher did not teach me that. And then the father says, that's a knowledge that cannot be taught, but that's a knowledge that has to be discovered. Right? So I would like all of you to ask yourself some very, very basic questions, right? I'm not going to ask you for answers, but these are questions that you will be revisiting all through your life. And the questions are as simply as, what is the purpose of all of this? As you're pursuing wealth, as you're pursuing your career, as you're pursuing relationships, keep asking yourselves, what's the point of all of this? Right? You may get an answer, you may not get an answer. You may get answers that you outgrow. You may find an answer today, and tomorrow you might find that, no, I think it's not the ultimate. But never stop questioning that. Never stop questioning yourselves. What am I doing here? What is the point of all of this? Why is it so important to really look at human life? I'm going to give you a scientific fact which a teacher gave me when I was a student. I didn't question him. I'm hoping none of you would question me. But like all scientific facts, I'm sure scientists understand more about this particular fact I'm going to share with you than it is now. But I think the idea is the same. In physiology, there is a concept called homeostasis. Many of you who have studied biology, or if there are any doctors in this call, I think you might know. The human body is about a few billion or trillion chemical reactions happening every second. Right? I'm a student of chemistry, and I know how complex biochemical reactions are. To see through one chemical reaction with a decent percentage of result or success rate involves a lot of headache, right? Because we've struggled doing that in a chemistry lab. For me to be sitting here and speaking to you, thinking of thoughts, having those thoughts being transformed into words, and me putting it out in a way that you all can understand, trillions of chemical reactions are happening right now in this human body, right? And the thing with all biochemical reactions, they're all dependent on temperature. You change the temperature a little bit, then the reaction changes. The percentage of the product that is formed changes. Sometimes the products that are let out changes, because it's also dependent on temperature, right? So homeostasis is the process by which the temperature of this body is maintained so that all of these reactions happen smoothly. And that's why, we give a lot of importance to fever. If body temperature goes up, why is that seen as a sign of something going wrong? Because that means a lot of things will go wrong if the body temperature is not brought down. Similarly, if you're in a very cold condition, it can endanger life. So homeostasis is the biological process by which the body temperature is maintained in such a way that all of these chemical reactions progress normally. Now, when they studied a species which is very, very close to Homo sapiens, probably one of the chimpanzees, which is pretty close to the human species, maybe 3 or 4 species before us. When they studied the brain of this organism, this particular species of chimpanzee, they found 96% of brain activity is used for homeostasis. Imagine 96% of your brain's capability is used up for this one process. Do you understand how important this process is? Now, when they study the human brain, can anybody take a guess what percentage of the human brain is used for homeostasis? Any guesses, or even any informed guesses? Anyone? So good that nobody knows, so I can get away with whatever answer I give. So the answer that this teacher gave me, when someone seems to say 1%, people agree with that. That seems to be too drastically less, isn't it? 96% in a species just not too far from ourselves. 1% of the brain for homeostasis. But actually, that's approximately 70%, says someone. 20 to 40%, says someone. 1% was actually pretty close, because the scientists discovered that 4% of the human brain is used for homeostasis. Imagine that, from 96%. Yeah, someone, Sister Pooja says 5%. Yeah, that's pretty close. Because from 96% in a chimp, which is pretty close to the Homo sapiens species, to 4% of the brain being used for homeostasis. So the question comes, what are we doing with 96%, which is left for other activities? What are we really doing with that? Well, you might be tempted to tell me, just look around, see all the scientific advances that we've had. We just had a wonderful and very proud moment a couple of days back. We sent a rover to the moon. Chandrayaan-3 was just successful. We've explored space. We can go to the depths of the ocean, and we can do all these kind of things. So all of these we've done with the 96% of the brain that is available to us. And that's fantastic, isn't it? But is that all? Is that all that we're meant to do? Because it's important for each one of you to ask this question. Because as you are moving into your career, you are going to you have to ask yourself, am I using the 96% of my brain for something really worthwhile? The next few minutes, I'm going to bore you with a little bit of science related to the brain. Before I do that, I would like to make a point, which just keep in mind, the brain is not the mind. If this point has been made before, I'm just repeating it for you. The brain is not equal to the mind. The brain is the physical organ in the human body that is very closely related to the human mind. So studying the brain, you can understand to a great extent the human mind. But the human mind is actually quite different from the brain. Typically, like how the human eye is different from vision, right? Because right now, what my eye is seeing, for those of you who have studied optics, is actually an image which is much smaller than what I'm seeing, which is inverted. That is what is falling into my optical nerve. It then goes into the brain, and there's a lot of processing that happens, and the light is being adjusted, and a lot of things are happening right now for me to have the vision what I'm having. So the eye, the organ that is called the eye, is different from the vision. Similarly, the mind is different from the brain. But studying the brain is very important to understanding the mind. So talking about the brain, we all have, I think, more or less come to the understanding that we all evolve over a period of time, right? The evolution of species. Most of us have settled to the Darwinian understanding of evolution. I think we don't really debate much about that. And that's why I said the chimpanzees, which are just a few generations or a few species before us. So if you look at the human brain, there is some part of the brain which actually is very, very old, which means it comes from the early species that we evolved from. Some part of the brain which is very advanced, which is very specific to the human race. If you look at the oldest part of the human brain, we refer to it as the reptilian brain, right? Reptilian brain because it's believed that we all have evolved from the reptiles. So a very small part of the brain actually is reptilian still. And around this reptilian brain, you have this system which is called the limbic system. That it's a mouthful if it is, we'll forget that. But there's a more interesting and a more understandable name for the system, and that is the reward system, right? The reward system of the brain. It's very interesting, and it's something that you can observe in yourself as you're going through your life. Every activity that you perform, be it eating, be it sleeping, be it having an ice cream, or be it having a good conversation with a friend, every physical activity that you perform is connected to some chemical activity in the brain, right? So let's say that I'm thirsty right now and I take a sip of water. The moment I take a sip of water, in my brain, there will be secretion of what you refer to as happy hormones, right? There are pleasure centers in my brain that get triggered, and these happy hormones are secreted. And the whole idea behind these happy hormones being secreted is, why am I actually drinking water? It's again a very complicated process, right? You need water content in your body. When that water content comes down, it expresses itself as a parched mouth, right? So when the mouth is parched, you try to wet it by drinking water. And when you drink water, these happy hormones are secreted in the brain, which means you're made to feel good about an activity that you've done. And immediately, the brain sends a message to the memory part of the brain saying that you did something right now, it made me feel happy, remember to do it again. right? It says that you did something now, it made me feel happy. Now note it down, and every time you have the same, your mouth is parched, do that, repeat that activity again, and you will feel happy again. Right? This is the reward system which is there in every brain, starting from the reptiles to the most advanced mammals, which we call ourselves to be. Right? So this is the standard thing which is there, which is going on in every brain. This happens every night when you go to sleep. This happens when you eat. If I were to break this down, what exactly is happening is, what is the most important function of the human brain? Can anybody think of an answer for that? What is the most important function of the human brain? Don't think too complicated. It's a very simple answer. What is the most important thing the human brain is supposed to do? Any answers? To think, something more basic than that. Coordination, something even more basic. To connect with every organ of the body. That is one of the processes, something even more fundamental. Sense, even more fundamental. To work, to control thought processes, action. Okay, there's Ankit Tiwari who says survival. I think that's pretty close. Because the most important function of my brain and your brain and each one's brain is to keep you alive. Right? Self-preservation is the fundamental function of the brain. Everything that it does is nothing but self-preservation. It has to keep this body alive. And everything the brain does is actually coming out of that. You have something called the fight or flight response, right? Imagine you are, you're on a hike and suddenly you're encountered with a bear or a wild animal. The brain actually triggers something which is referred to as the fight or the flight response, which means the brain says the most important thing right now is to survive, right? You have to run from there. So what the brain will do is it will start shutting down all the other processes in the body which are non-essential for that moment. I believe that you had a session on stress, and I think this must have been emphasized during that session, right? The brain actually switches on, just like how you have on your mobile, different modes, the silent mode, the sleep mode, the work mode, and all of that. The brain actually turns on what is referred to as a stress mode, starts switching off all the energy intensive activities which are not necessary for survival in that moment. It starts cutting down on digestion. It starts cutting down on fertility. It starts cutting down on very, very critical thinking. And that's why they say you should not be in an extended state of stress, because it will start affecting all of these processes in the body. Right? So this brain has this most important duty of self-preservation. So every activity that we do, like drinking water, eating food, sleeping, procreation, everything is actually born out of this self-preservation and self-extension. And how it goes about doing this is through this process of a reward cycle. Each of these activities is connected to a pleasure that you feel in your mind, and that pleasure is remembered, and you are made to repeat it again and again and again. And when this happens over many, many lifetimes, and when it goes through evolution, many of these things become what you refer to as instinct, right? Because you have done it so many times, and over so many species of evolution, some of these become instinct, and you don't even really apply your mind. The body automatically follows some of these things. So now, look at what we have done with this 96% of the brain activity that is available to us. Sleeping is a basic necessity, which makes the mind happy. The mind asks you to repeat it, and we do that every day. We have made better mattresses for ourselves, right? Drinking water when you're thirsty, as I said, is a basic necessity. We have found a way to have refrigerated water throughout the year. We have only used much of our thinking abilities to improve the way we give pleasure to ourselves. Do you agree with that? We have found more comforts in life. We have found more comfortable clothes. We've come up with more comfortable shoes to wear. So one of the statements that Swami would make, Bhagwan would make, is very interesting. He says, man today is actually not living like man, but is living like the best animal around. Human beings are not living like how human beings should live, but they are living like the best animals around, because the same things the animals do, find pleasure in everyday life, we have aced it, right? We find pleasure like no other animal or bird can. Is that all life is meant for? I spoke about the oldest part of the brain, in evolutionary terms, the reptilian brain. The most advanced part of the human brain is what is referred to as the, this part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex is supposed to be the home where advanced thinking happens, right? All your scientific reasoning, all your ability to, whatever we have created, all creativity comes from there. So we have used much of our prefrontal cortex activity, which is advanced thinking in humans, which animals can't do, which birds can't do, only in improving the same reward cycle that you find right from the reptiles to lower mammals to birds to everything. We have used our advanced thinking to live better animal lives. And that's the tragedy of the whole thing, isn't it? Is there more to life? I think that's something that we really have to ask ourselves. The point that I'm trying to make is, imagine you have this phenomenal ability to think and reason. Just to throw another point over there, much of moral reasoning and spiritual thinking and philosophical thought happens in the prefrontal cortex. All philosophers, I don't know how they study the brain, but if you take any of the philosophers or saints of any religion, any school of thought, if we were to study their brain, we will find that the activity of that prefrontal cortex was maximum. Same will be the case with a scientist who's come up with all the conveniences that we all have. The point I'm trying to make is, if we are able to free our minds from this relentless pursuit of pleasure, maybe we will free our minds for higher thinking, right? I'm not saying pleasure seeking is wrong. I'm not saying to find happiness in life is wrong. In fact, that is not what Vedanta says. But if we are able to control and free ourselves a little from this relentless pleasure seeking, maybe we will free our mind a little more for critical thinking. There's this beautiful dialogue in one of the Upanishads, the Kathopanishad, between a young boy who's supposed to be a spiritual seeker and Lord Yama. For those of you who don't know, Lord Yama is supposed to be the god of death in Indian culture, right? So this boy has a very, very deep conversation with the Lord of Death. The boy asks him, I want to understand life. I want you to tell me what is
Can't hear you.
Can't
Sorry.
hear you, sir.
Can you hear me now? I think someone
Yeah, now it's
muted me by mistake. Yeah. Okay. So there is this very interesting conversation that happens in the Kathopanishad between Lord Yama and this little boy, young boy called Nachiketa. Right? Nachiketa goes and asks Yama, you tell me about life. I want to know the secrets of life. And Yama tells him that you're too young for that. But then this boy persists and he says, I want to know. And Lord Yama makes this beautiful statement. He says, all of the human instrumentalities, we're talking about the mind, and then you have the senses, the sense organs, which give you input from the world outside, right? Your eyes, your ears, your sensation of touch. These are all ways by which you take input from outside. We were once having a very interesting conversation. If you are told that you have to give up one of your senses, which one will you give up? Right? You have the sense of sight, you have the sense of hearing, you have sense of taste, and you have the sense of touch, and the sense of speech. So if you are told that today you have to give up one of your senses, which one will you give up? And a good reason for that. Anyone? Someone says the sense of taste. How many of you are ready to give up the sense of taste? That's like taking away 90% of your will to live. Right? There's this interesting Instagram reel that goes around that if you can quit your morning coffee, you will be giving up 90% of your will to live. And I can't agree more. Who's ready to give up the sense of taste? Sense of feeling, touch, sense of speech. Okay. So I'll come to the discussion that we were having. Sense of hearing, sense of feeling. So I think in all the responses we've got here itself, the sense of touch seems to have repeated. And I believe that when this question was asked to a group of people, a lot of people actually said the sense of touch. Right? And many of them said the sense of touch because they felt that that's one sense that we're not actively using as such. Right? Without an eye moving around, it'll be difficult. Without hearing, you'll need some help from others around. But somehow this sense of touch doesn't seem to be all that important. But then the scientists explain that we actually use the sense of touch so much more than we realize. You actually sense the size of a room through the sense of touch without your knowledge. So much of this homeostasis that I spoke about comes from the sense of touch. Because your body is constantly controlling temperature within the body based on what is the temperature around. So for survival, apparently the sense of touch is more important than we credit it for. Right? So coming back to that conversation between Lord Yama and Nachiketa. So all of these senses that we have are actually outward looking. They are like windows, right? They are bringing in inputs from the world outside. And taking all the inputs, the mind is actually going outward. Right? What is it that I can eat? What is it that I can read? What is it that I can watch? So Yama makes this very, very beautiful statement. And just think of that. He says 99.9%, of course, he doesn't say it in the form of a percentage. He says most people in this world have their minds and senses turned outward. Everybody is looking outward to find out. As I said in the beginning, we're all studying subjects, we're studying material around us, we're studying people around us. We are counting the 9 people in the group, but we're not counting ourselves. The mind is constantly going outward, and Lord Yama tells Nachiketa, Kaschid dhira, which means there is one brave individual in millions who turns the mind inward. And he starts or she starts finding the hidden truths of life. Right? Among millions, one manages to turn the mind inward. You all are sitting in a session like this. I'm not trying to tell you that you're lucky to hear me. But what I'm trying to tell you is, it's a Sunday afternoon. You could have been doing anything. Right? You could have been watching Netflix. You could have been going out with your friends. But you are exposed to a line of thought which is trying to tell you, look within. And I don't think this has come by chance. Right? This ability to even be given this thought that there is more to life than just chasing pleasures. You have come in contact with a thought such as this because in some way you are ready for it. Whether you're going to take it forward from here or not, I think it's each one's prerogative, right? Each one's effort after this. But to be informed there is something more to life than merely earning and fulfilling pleasures. I think this, you've been made aware of this because in some way or the other, you're prepared for it. And if we were to believe in what Vedanta says, many, many lifetimes has brought us to this point today, where you're made to think there is something more to life than merely this. That's why Lord Yama says, because he's the one who has taken so many lives, right? He comes and says, I see so many people who are born, who live their entire life, and they die. Kaschid dhira, one brave individual, one adventurous young man or woman turns the mind inward. The more we release our critical thinking and all our thinking, all our mental abilities and reasoning from pleasure seeking, there are chances that we will turn inward. So what are we really, am I suggesting to all of you that you must just give up everything and find the nearest ashram and go and settle down there? Interestingly, that's not what we are meant to do. In fact, that could be counterproductive. Because as I said, the whole process of the reward system is the pleasure tells you what is good for you. The pleasure is constantly telling you what is good for this body. So there are two things or two or three things that I suggest. Find ways by which you can go about doing this. The simplest thing is, don't let pleasure alone drive your life. Don't let material happiness and the pleasures that you can get through satisfying your senses and your body alone drive your life. There should be something more to life, right? One of the things could be to be useful to the people around you. One of the things could be to find some deeper purpose in life. Let it not merely be for the satisfaction of the cravings of the mind. Going back to the Kathopanishad, there is a very beautiful analogy that they give. And again, it's the beauty of the simplicity of these things. Before I do that, I'll have to give you a little technicality about the human mind. Don't worry, it's actually very simple. It's not too deep. Can you think of the various activities of the mind? What are the different things that your mind is actually doing for you on a daily basis? Can some of you come up with some answers for that? What are the different things, different functions of the mind? Anyone? What all do you use your mind for? Very, very simple answers. It's not complicated at all. Decision making, studies, coordination with body parts, thoughts, reflexes, overthinking. You're not supposed to be using it for that anyway. Controlling body functions to manage other organs, conveniences, creating thoughts, survival to make ourselves better. I'm looking for very, very simple answers. Simple functions of the mind. Remembering, memory. Yes, that's one. Decision making was one. That's one. Finding comfort. Okay, I think I'll take that also as an answer. So I will give you the answers which these people came up with, right, to send and receive signals. I think I agree with whatever is being shared as thoughts here. See, the beautiful thing about all of these great people who actually spent time thinking about all of this is they were not distracted. The problem with all of us is we are so distracted with so many things. When you're not distracted, you can actually observe your own self. You can see how you're responding to people. You can see what thoughts are coming to you. You can see what fears are coming to your mind, where those fears are coming from. So when some of these great thinkers sat down and they wanted to list down what are the various processes that are happening in the mind, they came up with 4 functions. One of it is simple functioning of the mind. For everything that you do, you need a certain aspect of the mind. I can't speak if my mind is not functioning properly. I can't pick up a spoon and take food to my mouth if my mind is not normal. Right? Because we see all of that. When the mind starts going out of order, even the simple tasks are not, you can't do them. To walk on the road, you need the mind to be normal. So this aspect of the mind was very, very simply called the working mind. The mind that you require for all the basic works that you do, the working mind. And this was called in Sanskrit as manas, right? Simply put, the working mind. Then you have this mind which stores memories, right? Because you need to remember, I said, the reptilian mind, the reptilian brain does that. Every pleasure is remembered. Every pain is remembered. When you touch fire and you burn your finger, your mind remembers it for an entire lifetime, right? And we start judging people like that. You see a certain person behave in a certain way, you remember that. I should be careful around this person next time, right? Or you say that, oh, this person is helpful. When I need something, I can come back to this person. So the second function of the mind is memory. You keep remembering things. And this was referred to as chitta, right? Manas, chitta. And the third one is decision making. Constantly we're making choices. Should I attend this meeting? Should I not attend this meeting? Should I eat this for lunch? Should I not eat this for lunch? Should I stay awake and do something tonight, or should I go to bed early? Right? And that decision making is based on so many other factors. You take in all the other things that are going on in your life, how you're feeling, everything. So the third important function of the mind is decision making. And that aspect of the mind is the intellect or the buddhi. So you have manas, chitta, and buddhi. And the fourth one is the most subtle. All of this is based on the idea of I. Right? The whole concept of self-preservation does not exist without me defining that I am this body. Me defining that I am this person who is so-and-so's son, who is so-and-so's husband, who is so-and-so's wife, who is so-and-so's daughter. Right? This idea of me, I, and that is called ahankara. Right? It simply means the I-ness. Yes, someone lifted their hand. Anything you want me to repeat? Okay, I'll carry on then. So the fourth aspect is called ahamkara, right? This idea of something that defines who I am. So coming to this beautiful analogy which Kathopanishad gives, it gives this analogy of a chariot. Most of you would be familiar with the idea of a chariot, right? And the beauty of all of these analogies and stories is it takes inputs from all those things which are around them. That's why you have the idea of a pot, you have the idea of a chariot, you have the idea of gold and the jewels, and all these examples are taken from whatever was around them. So in this chariot, they represent these four categories of the mind in that. And what are they? You have the horses, you have a charioteer, you have somebody who's traveling in the chariot, you have the chariot itself, and you have the reins through which the charioteer controls the horses, right? So what are these various components? The chariot itself is the body. The physical body is the chariot. The horses are the senses. The charioteer is the buddhi, the intellect, or the decision maker. And the rope with which he is controlling the horses is the working mind, manas. And who is traveling in the chariot? It is the self, aham. Right? Now imagine this scenario. The charioteer does not have control over the horses. What will the horses do? They will go to wherever they want to go. They're trotting on the road. The moment they see grass anywhere, they'll start going towards that. Right? So when the horses pull, the reins of the charioteer get pulled in that direction. And the buddhi has no control. Right? So the scriptures say that if you're going to have your life completely led by the pleasures that the senses seek, this is the scenario. Can you get to any place if the horses are going to be allowed to go wherever they want to go? The horses are very important. Without the horses, the chariot is not going to move. But if the horses are going to be allowed to go wherever they want to go, they will pull the reins in their direction. The buddhi will only be holding it for namesake, and the chariot will go nowhere. The better scenario is the charioteer has control. The charioteer gives directions to the horse, and the horses draw the chariot in the direction the charioteer wants it to go. Right? Now, the charioteer is the intellect. So the intellect must have some idea of where it is going, right? The charioteer, you have a driver of a car, the driver should know where he's taking the car. So where does that knowledge come from? Where does your decision making come from? Can some of you think of an answer for that? Where does your decision making come from? Why did you choose to join this program? Brain. The brain is the place where the decision making happens. Where do the inputs come from? Everybody is saying mind. The mind is where the decision making happens. Senses, okay. Experiences. Let's say that some friend of yours came and told you, let's go and join this program. Right? Or something as simple as a friend comes and tells you, hey, I heard this movie is really good, let's go watch it. Your decision making happens because of the inputs that you're getting from outside, isn't it? A part of your decision making happens because you pay attention to the words of some people. You're in a decide a course in your career, what subject to study or what course to take up, you will go and ask somebody whose words you value, isn't it? It could be your professor, it could be your elder in your family, it could be someone whom you consider as being intelligent or successful. You will go and ask them, what course should I do? I mean, what should I study? So what you're actually doing is you're opening up your mind or your decision making to an external voice of reason. And there is also memory. There is also past experiences. So this buddhi, the charioteer, decides which direction to go based on inputs that the charioteer receives from people outside as well as one's own experiences. And as we are going through life, this is the most important thing that we are doing. To whom are you opening your mind to? Today we are ready to go out into the social media and listen to anyone and everyone who has an opinion. Right? Somebody who follows a diet for 2 weeks comes and advises us about how that diet works. And we are ready to listen. Nowadays, you have so many interesting, inspirational messages which come. You listen to it and you feel, oh, that's so interesting. Well, who's giving that advice? Do they really know that whether it works or not? Did they simply come up with something and they tell it to us? And without our knowledge, we actually give so much importance to these words of advice. So one of the most important critical things that each one of us have to do is, who is giving us advice? Whose advice are we giving importance to? What kind of books are you reading? The author of that book, is he a person of values? I am listening to a talk. Am I listening to someone who is speaking from experience? Am I listening to someone who's a person of values? Is he or she going to gain anything if I'm going to follow his or her advice? Then how can that advice be pure? If I'm going to benefit from you listening to me, will my advice not be contorted? Today we are ready to take advice from every advertisement that we see. Who benefits from that? Today we are ready to open our minds to anything and everything on social media. Who benefits from that? Right? So one of the most important things that we have to do is, whose inputs are we opening ourselves to? So coming back to that point of having controlled pleasures, the whole idea of this analogy of the chariot is, you should be able to rein in this pleasure seeking that happens relentlessly every day in our life. Seeking pleasures is not wrong. They have to be sought. They have to be fulfilled. But you have to ensure that the direction that they are taking you in is right for you. And for that, a little bit of self-restraint is very, very important. In Indian culture, or in fact in any of the cultures, you will find a lot of importance being given to going on pilgrimages. Right? I think it's there in every religion and every culture. Today we make a pilgrimage a vacation, but you know what a pilgrimage was meant for? A pilgrimage was meant for you to go and lead a life which is much, much simpler and less luxury filled than your life right now. Because you're actually giving your mind break from that pleasure seeking and luxury of your life, so that your mind can turn within. Right? So every culture actually has these hidden hints of how you have to withdraw from the world a little bit. Now you have all kinds of techniques that have been taught. You have meditation retreats. You have The whole idea of going out on a seva, going for a grama seva, is meant for that. Go into a village. You withdraw yourself from that relentless pleasure seeking so that kaschid dhira, you are given that opportunity to turn within. The second point that I would like to make is, see, as I said in the whole description of that reward cycle, every pleasure is attached to a purpose. Never ever detach a pleasure from its purpose. I'll give you a simple example. One of the standard pleasures that we are all experiencing every day is the sleep that we have at night. Right? The whole purpose of going to sleep at night is so that you wake up fresh in the morning. If I'm going to indulge in that pleasure so much that I wake up the next morning feeling sleepy or feeling dull, then I've indulged in a purpose that has actually hurt the purpose, indulged in a pleasure that has hurt the purpose. The whole idea of eating food is to energize this body so that we can go and do activity which is important. But if I'm going to eat so much that it makes me lethargic and unable to carry out my everyday activities, then I'm indulging in a pleasure, divorcing it from the purpose. So every pleasure that you pursue in life, ask yourself this question: am I pursuing it in a way that it is taking me towards the purpose or away from the purpose? I think then you'll automatically be able to have a control over the pleasures that you undergo. And the last point that I'd like to make, probably I'll wind up with this. Pay attention to what you are experiencing every day. Pay attention to the pleasures that you are enjoying every day. The whole concept of the Zen philosophy or meditation or mindfulness is this: pay attention. There's this beautiful analogy again that comes from another Upanishad, the Mandukya Upanishad. This one has this beautiful allegory that it gives us. There is a tree, and in that tree, there are a lot of fruits. And living in that tree are two birds. One bird which is in the lower branch, and another bird which is in the higher branch. So this bird which is in the lower branch is hopping from one branch to the other, eating the fruits that are there. Some fruits are sweet, some fruits are bitter. Every time it eats a bitter fruit, it goes in search of a sweeter fruit. So it spends all its time hopping from one branch to the other in pursuit of sweeter fruits. One day, while it eats one of the fruits, the story goes that the fruit is so bitter, right? It's so bitter that it actually gets so disgusted with this life that it's leading. What am I doing? And when this bird looks up, it is then that it sees the second bird in the same tree. The second bird is not hopping around from one branch to the other. It is not eating any fruits. It is absolutely tranquil. It seems to be self-satisfied and self-contained. And this bird looks up, looks at that bird and says, how I wish I was like that bird. But the very next moment it sees another fruit and it jumps to that branch trying to taste that fruit. And that fruit is sweet, so it forgets about this thought that it had before. Oh, I want to be like that bird. Right? And then it again starts jumping from one branch to the other in search of fruits. When we go through life, whether we want it or not, there are going to be extremely happy moments. There are going to be extremely sad moments. Pay attention to each one of those moments. When you are going through a very, very happy time, let's say you've gone out and you've bought the latest mobile, the latest iPhone. It's coming out next month, I guess, right? Imagine you've been planning to buy that for for so many years. Finally, you go out and you buy the mobile. You're going to be really happy, right? Let not anybody tell you that you're not going to be happy. Of course, you're going to be excited about it. Pay attention to your mind and ask yourself, how long are you actually excited about it? How long does that happiness last? Every happiness that you experience fades away. Every time, similarly, when you go through a very difficult experience, there will be a strong sense of dispassion that you will feel, what am I doing with life? What is the point of all of this? When you're in a relationship and somebody hurts you, you will wonder, what is the point of all of this? Hold on to that thought and try to think deep about it. Ask these deep questions, right? Because when we do those things, that is when we are actually removing this critical thinking that we have, which we have been blessed with, and we have the ability to turn it towards something much, much more deeper. And when you start asking questions, you will start finding answers. Because if we don't ask, we will never get the answers. The answers could be different for you tomorrow. The answers could be different for you the day after. The answers that you find might be different from the answers that I find. But what's most important is to ask those questions, right? So those were the thoughts I wanted to share. If you have any questions, I'm more than happy to share my thoughts on them. As I just said, don't expect for the perfect answers, but I can share answers that I have come up with, which has occurred to me, and I would be happy to share them with you.
Really a wonderful section. Now we are open for Q&A. So if you have any doubts, if you want to ask questions, please raise your hand or you can drop it in the chat.
Yes, anyone has any questions based on what I said? Anything was not clear, you can ask me to repeat. More than happy to. We do everything for self-pleasure and satisfaction, then why shouldn't we indulge in pleasure-generating things? That's a question that's very important. And I think that's precisely what I addressed in the talk, right? It is important to experience these pleasures. See, life is created in such a way that you actually need these pleasures in everyday life. There is a very beautiful phrase that they say in Vedanta, where they describe human beings. Human beings are described as Ananda Pipasi, right? Ananda Pipasi. It means beings that thirst for happiness, which means our whole journey in life is nothing but a pursuit of happiness. And when you talk of these pleasures are said to be the smallest forms of happiness that we are capable of enjoying. There's a beautiful analogy which Bhagwan Baba would give. You have these godowns where they store rice grains. Right? Many of you must have seen. After the harvest, they would put all these rice grains in sacks, and they would keep them in warehouses or godowns. One of the problems they would always have in these storage facilities is the problems with rodents, right? Rats would come and eat away all of these things that are stored. So one of the very indigenous ways by which they used to protect these godowns and storage facilities is they would put some puffed rice, right? I don't know what is it called in Hindi, puffed rice, poha, right? Exactly. So they would take some little quantity of poha and keep it in the open in the godown, right? In the storage facility or in the warehouse, they would keep these poha in an open place, which means the rodents will come they will eat what is easily available, and they'll go away without touching the grains that are there. Right? What is easily accessible is given to the rodents to fulfill their pleasure seeking, and it actually becomes blind to all that is available right maybe just a few meters away. And if you look at what is this puffed rice made of, it's also made of the same grains. But imagine one sack of puffed rice, I don't know, it'll be about 1.5, 2 kgs. Whereas one sack of grains will be 100 kgs. So which means the same pleasure that you actually feel in deeper pursuits is given in a very, very tiny form through the pleasure seeking that we do in everyday life. And that is actually the greatest distraction that is given to you. So it is not that we should not seek this pleasure. Even as you're experiencing it, pay attention to it. That's why I said, how long does it last? Suppose I tell you, I'm going to give you $1 million today. Will you be happy or not? Certainly you'll be happy. If I tell you I'm going to give you $1 million today and I'm going to take it away tomorrow, how happy is that going to make you? All the pleasures that we seek in life are like that. They are given to us today and taken away the next moment. And we are going on repeating this again and again in pursuit of that. But there is a pleasure that you can seek. I'm not going to go into all of that. Man has the ability to find pleasure that is eternal, that once received can never be taken away from you. The whole idea is pushing you towards that pursuit. Right? Otherwise, we are like rodents which are distracted from the main granary of all the wealth that there is. I hope that at least gives an idea of the answer. Okay, there's another question. What if we get scared from our own dream? If we can achieve it or not? How we will achieve it? What is the way that we will achieve it? See, it's a very important, what do I say, a problem that we preoccupy ourselves with. We have ambitions and we always wonder whether we will be able to fulfill our ambitions or not. Simple thing is, have a dream, work towards it. Absolutely nothing wrong in doing that. We all are supposed to do that. But just, I would suggest, have a little bit of doubt in yourself. Maybe I'm thinking, maybe there's something more than what I am dreaming up. Maybe I can get something better. Maybe there's something more for me. Maybe I have not come up with the best plan. Right? Just give yourself that element of doubt. The story that I always love to go back to is the story of Abdul Kalam. Right? He narrates of this fascination that he had for being a fighter pilot. All through his schooling, he always wanted to be a fighter pilot, and he dreamt of the day when he would be flying a jet. He worked towards it. He studied hard. Finally, when he goes for that interview to become a fighter pilot or to join the Air Force, I think they shortlist 13 candidates or 12 candidates, and he's the 13th candidate who misses out. Right? He just misses out the ability to become, to fulfill that dream. And then he goes, I mean, he's very, very distraught. He's in a place where he's absolutely lonely and he's very despondent. He's in a state of depression. And he writes that at that point, he actually meets a sadhu. And the sadhu comes up to him and asks him, what happened? Why are you so sad? And he narrates how he had this dream for all his childhood and he's not going to make the cut. Because the next year, I think he can apply, but he'll be too old to get the job or something like that, right? So that was the last chance that he had. So the sadhu tells him that, yeah, see, you had a dream, you worked towards it, but who knows, maybe what is in store for you is better than the dream that you had. So that was the only word of encouragement that at that moment Abdul Kalam says that he needed. So he had another interview which he had to go and attend. If he did not clear this one, he goes and attends that interview. Eventually, he joins the DRDO, becomes, we know the course that his life took, becomes the scientific advisor to the Prime Minister, chief of DRDO, the missile man. And he says, imagine I wanted to be a fighter pilot, one person in the Air Force. I finally become the man who is the supreme commander of all the three defense forces. What I dreamt of, but what I actually was given. So nothing wrong in having a dream and pursuing it, but just have an element of doubt, because we think that only that can give us happiness, only that is going to give us fulfillment. Life is so much more than any one dream that we can come up with. Have a dream, work towards it, nothing wrong, but never ever give up yourself to despondency, thinking that, oh, I couldn't achieve this and everything is done and over, right? Just keep that mind open. I think that's something that I'd like to leave there. So that was one question. There's one, we have some goals in our life and many paths to go. There's some time which path is to be chosen, we get confused. Some paths are seen with difficulties and some with easy ways. So how to choose a path there? A very, very general question. The simple point I would like to make for that is, going back to whatever we were speaking about, right? About pleasures and about pain. I made a point that we all are living like the best animals around, right? We are not living human lives, but we are living like the best animals around. Bhagwan Baba used to give a very beautiful analogy. He would say, you stand in front of a goat, you hold a stick in one hand, and you have a bunch of leaves in one hand. Or you have two people standing there, one with a stick in one hand and one with a bunch of leaves. Which side will the animal go to? It'll go towards the leaves. It'll avoid the man with the stick, right? The reason is, in the animal's mind, the reasoning is very simple. Go towards that which gives me pleasure, avoid that which gives me pain. If we are going to lead our life with the same mentality, that whatever is going to give us pain and difficulty, we keep away from that, and whatever is going to give us happiness, we're going to go towards that. We are just leading lives like animals, isn't it? Instead of that, fix a purpose in your life, right? And move towards that purpose. In the direction of that purpose, if you find difficulties, take them on. Let not difficulties and difficult situations presenting themselves in front of you deter you from your purpose, right? So that is the main difference between human beings and animals. You have a higher goal in life, and you don't let giving up little pleasures here and there, or having to face a few problems here and there, deter you from that. I think that is how we need to constantly progress in life. And for that, all of this is important, right? A little bit of, I was talking to you about the Gurukula system of the ancient India. You could be a prince, but you will be put in a Gurukula where you will have to sleep on the floor. You'll have to eat the same food that the other poor students eat. You could be the emperor's son, but you'll be living a life like that. Why is that? Because it's a training for you to take on a difficult life. Unfortunately, we all have been pampered too much through our childhood and our young years, right? Unfortunately, that's what's happened with all of us. That when we go out into the world, we are constantly allowing pleasures and pains to decide what we do. That should not decide what we do. We should have an ambition, we should have a goal, And if pleasures come in the way, we take it happily. Those are brownie points. If pain comes on the way, we overcome them. That should be the attitude. I hope that at least gives something to think about. The other question here is, there is constant war of our mind of achieving specific things and fear of certain things missing in our life. How do we utilize that fear of missing out thought continuously running in our mind? I'll try to answer that based on what I make of this question. See, all of these emotions that run in the mind, be it fear, be it stress, everything is actually important for our life. We are not here to completely remove anything from our life, right? If we remove fear from our life, we will become reckless. We should have a little bit of fear. But if we are going to have fear governing our life, then we cannot do anything in life. There's a very interesting talk. If you have the time, you should go and listen to that. It's one of the most viewed talks on TED by a speaker by name, I think, Kelly McGonigal. Right? It's one of the finest talks from the point of view of oratory too. So she is actually a health psychologist. And she makes this point that she goes around, she said, much of my career I've been going around telling people that stress is a killer. Right? Stress kills you. In fact, there is a BBC documentary which goes by the title, I'm not too sure whether it's BBC, but it's a very famous documentary that goes by the title, Stress the Serial Killer. Right? So she says that for much of my career, I've gone around telling people that stress kills. But then she comes up with a scientific survey which says that stress does not kill, but thinking that stress is bad kills. Having a very, what do you say, a negative relationship with the concept of stress actually is bad. You should have a healthy conversation with the fear that you have in your mind. You should have a healthy relationship with the sense of stress that you undergo in everyday life. Because all of that is relevant. When you are put under stress, I told you about that fight or flight response. It is necessary. That mode that your brain takes you into is necessary for your life. Right? So that is why in all of this, I'm again going back to the whole idea of what is the purpose of anything that we do. That's why going back to that, reading the manual before you start using the gadget. If today, most of you are probably in your early 20s, if today you tell me I don't have time for this, I will read the scriptures, I will read the Bible or the Quran or whatever, Upanishads or the Gita, I will read it after I'm retired because I will have more time then. We are giving up discovering the very most fundamental thing of life. Because without fixing the purpose of life, you cannot go about doing anything in life, isn't it? The moment you find, it's like I often give this analogy. I'm living in this town called Puttaparthi, 3 hours from Bangalore. So if I want to go to Bangalore, I have to go to the bus stand. What is the first thing I will do? I will find out which are the buses that are going to Bangalore. Right? That's the first point I'll have to do. Then among the buses that are available, I will look at the buses which are comfortable. I will say, okay, there's an AC bus there. I'd like to take that. Can I afford it? Yes, I can afford it. Then I take the AC bus and then I go. What am I doing here? I have fixed my destination. Based on the destination, I look at my options. Based on the options available, then I look at comfort. Now imagine if I go to the bus stand and I'll say, hey, that bus looks most comfortable. Let me get into that. and I'll go wherever that bus takes me. That's not how you go about doing a journey, right? So you all are in a very, very critical point in your life where you'll have to find out, where do I want to get in life, right? At least having a sense of that. You might not figure it out completely, but having a sense of that, then you look at what are your options. And then you look at what are the luxuries that you can give yourself. I think that is what is missing in most of the youngsters, and that's what Yama told Nachiketa, that everybody is running with the horses, letting the horses drag the chariot where they want. And you'll never get anywhere, right? So use all of these emotions, use fears that you have, use the stress that you feel in your life, use this little happiness that your mind seeks, but all of that within this pursuit of purpose, which each one of you have to figure out for yourself. I hope that made a little bit of sense. Anyone else? Any other questions?
Yeah, there is a question from Shavani. She tells that many of the times it happens that we have goals in our mind, but sometimes we get influenced by others' opinions, and sometimes our track changes. So, how do we stay firm with our goals?
Okay, two things. See, it is all right for the goal to change. I'm not going to say that you fix a goal and you have to stick to that, because we are maturing through the process also, right? Today, you set yourself a goal at the age of 21. At the age of 30, you might think that, okay, I mean, I have better things to do. It's nothing wrong in the goals changing. Just putting that out. I'm not saying that keep all your goals flexible like that. So it's not wrong in you refining your pursuits as you go through life. But at the same time, going back to that point I was saying, whose words are you giving importance to? That is something that you have to constantly keep reviewing through as you go through life. Are you listening to a person just because you don't want to displease them? Sometimes it's okay, right? Sometimes listening to your parents just because I don't want to displease them. They've been so kind to me. They've been the best well-wishers I've had. I don't want to displease them. It's okay. But constantly ask yourself, why are you taking into account another person's opinion? Are they in your mind so really worthy to be obeyed? See, that is why if you look at Indian culture, right, for that matter, any culture of relevance and substance, in India, we have a lot of respect for people who are achievers, right? Somebody who is a millionaire, someone who is a businessman who has achieved a lot, a cricketer who is top of the charts, an actor who has achieved a lot. But still, the person whom we'll give most importance is actually a sannyasi, right? The Indian culture is such that if a sadhu or a sannyasi walks into a gathering, he will be given more importance than anybody else. Sometimes we speak of this as a flaw in our culture. Actually, it isn't. What are we actually doing here is we are giving importance to sacrifice and selflessness more than anything else. If there is someone who has attained such perfection in his or her life that he or she says that I don't need pleasures in life to keep me happy, we start paying attention to their words. If there is someone in life who is not going to gain anything from the advice they give you, their words are worth listening to, right? Because their words are probably coming from wisdom. Their words are coming from a very, very pure form of love, right? Most of these saints and sages that we speak of are like that they have figured out something and they want to really share their wisdom with you. There's this beautiful story that they often tell. There was this town where there was this huge wall. The wall was towering and nobody knew what was on the other side of the wall. The people in the village would wonder, what is on the other side of the wall? What is on the other side of the wall? And there would be some youngsters who were very adventurous. They wanted to scale the wall. So one man scaled the wall with much difficulty. Finally, when he goes to the top of the wall, he looks on the other side and he says, "Oh, wow." And he jumps onto the other side, never to come back. So the mystery continues. What is on the other side of the wall? What is on the other side of the wall? Every other man who would eventually climb up the wall would look on the other side and say, "Oh, wow," and jump to the other side. So nobody in this side of the wall knew what was on the other side. So the story goes, eventually there was one man who labored and climbed the wall. He looked at the wall, looked on the other side, and he says, "Oh, wow." And he came down. He did not jump to the other side. And he came to tell what is so glorious about the other side. And they say the one who comes back to tell what is on the other side is who a guru is, who a spiritual master is. That joy and that experience that they have experienced, they come to lead us to. Right? And that's why we, as a nation, as a culture, we always give so much importance to philosophers and spiritual thinkers. I'm not here to say that everybody has got it figured out and you have to listen to everybody. But these are also certain pointers as to whose words are we giving importance to. So there is a chance that you have a goal for your life right now. You might say today that, at the end of 10 years, I want to have a startup which is a unicorn. Fair enough. Nothing wrong in that. But through the process, if you were to find a certain wiser thought, why not feature that in? In fact, that's the story about Alexander the Great, right? One of the legends about Alexander the Great, whether it really happened or not, we don't know. His whole idea was he wanted to conquer the world. He starts off in Macedonia, in Greece, and he starts coming eastward. He has conquered huge areas of land. Finally, he comes towards the Indian subcontinent. And apparently he finds there a sadhu who has absolutely no possessions. He does not have anything with him. And Alexander sees him. And what does he notice in that sadhu? Alexander has conquered so much, but he is not happy. This sadhu has absolutely nothing, but he seems to be so happy. And that happiness in the man who does not have anything unsettles Alexander. That's what they say. And he starts looking at whatever he has conquered and whatever he has achieved and say, what is the point of all of this? What am I doing all this for? And one of the legends is he actually loses the will to conquer the world after that, because he finds that it is pointless. The whole idea is to find happiness which is beyond all of this. And that's why apparently one of the things that happens when Alexander dies is he makes a very strange request. He says, when you carry me in the coffin along the kingdom roads, ensure that both my hands are actually outside. He says, make a coffin in such a way that both my hands are actually, the people can see both my palms. And when his ministers ask him why such a strange request, he says, let all the people know that Alexander the Great, who conquered the whole world, when he died, he had to leave empty-handed. Right? So through this process of realizing your dream, there is an opportunity that you might come across something which is a thought which is wiser than what you've had. So be ready to realign yourself when that happens. But otherwise, there's nothing wrong in having a dream and ensuring that you're moving towards that. If you're going to take advice which is going to change your course, pay attention to what kind of advice it is and who it is coming from. Sorry for that long answer, but those are things I wanted to share.
So one last question.
Yes.
Yeah. How does jap or chanting help in control over?
See, there are two things about this. What I want to think of. One is there is no logical explanation to it, really. I know it helps. Right? If you try it out, you will figure out it helps. Because there's something about this that actually works. Taking a mantra or something and repeating it constantly in your mind somehow makes the mind more manageable. Somehow makes the mind a little more controllable. Especially if it is a name that is associated with some form of divinity. Right? Any form of divinity that you are fond of. Because see, the moment you say God, the moment you say divinity, what is it that comes to your mind? For me, it is a sense of completeness. It is a sense of purity. Right? Any form of God, you say anything, Jesus or Krishna, or for me it is Swami. The moment I think of a name and the associated form, the emotions that are attached to that, the thoughts that are attached to that are all very, very noble and pleasant and holy. And when I'm constantly repeating a name, one of the things that happens is I am actually increasing thoughts about that quality in my mind. And in a way that I cannot really logically explain, it starts helping me in the mind. Right? That's why I'm saying that I probably cannot completely reason to you how it works, but it really does work. And one of the beautiful stories that Bhagwan would tell us, which you might have heard, it's a very famous story. And the story goes that there is this man who has a lot of work to do. He has a house, he has a farm, he has a business that he has to run, and he is always running out of time and exhausted. So he goes to a sadhu and he explains his problem and he says, this is what is happening to me and what should I do? So the sadhu says, I have a lot of powers, so I'll gift you a genie. Right? He says, I'll gift you a genie, and this genie is very powerful. This genie will do anything that you ask him to do. But there's one problem with this genie. You should not keep him quiet. You should keep giving him some work or the other. This man says, oh, that's not a problem because I have a lot of work to do. So he says, okay. And he calls the genie and tells him that henceforth this man will be your master. You can go and serve him. So this man goes, takes back this genie. And at one point he says, okay, go and sow all the seeds. Done. The genie comes back within few hours and says it's done. Then he says, okay, go and water all the plants. Done. After a couple of days, this man realizes that this genie is so efficient that it is able to do everything that he asks in no time. The one point that the sadhu said I missed out is, this genie has to be constantly kept occupied. If you don't, the genie will come to eat you up. Right? So then he realizes within 2-3 days, he has exhausted all the work that he has, and now this genie is after him. So this man comes running to the sadhu and asks him, what do I do? So the sadhu says, I told you it has to be kept occupied all the time. But what is the solution? I don't have so much work to do. He says it's very simple. You ask the genie to erect a pole, right? And you tell the genie to go up and down the pole. And the sadhu says, let the genie keep going up and down the pole. Whenever you want it to do any work, you ask the genie to come down from the pole and do the work. Once the work is accomplished, ask the genie to go up and down the pole. The message in the story is that genie that all of us have been given, which is extremely efficient, is the human mind. But the problem with this human mind is we should never leave it alone. If you leave it unoccupied, as they say, an idle mind is the devil's workshop. So whenever it is free, you have to find a very harmless way to keep it occupied. And one of the most harmless ways, and as I said, a subtly beneficial way, which we may not be able to sufficiently explained with logic is japa. Take of any name, any god that form, any form of god that you are comfortable with, and keep repeating that in your mind in the times when you do not need to completely occupy your mind. Right? There are so many activities through the day we do like that, when we are driving, when we're standing in a queue, right? Constantly keep the mind occupied in that. And this is not something that you will find as a reward in heaven, right? This is a reward that you will find in immediate future. Take up this japa of any name, as I said, and try it out for a few months. You will start finding benefits from it right away, right? That's something that I can tell you for sure. You will find that you're becoming calmer. You will find that you're able to make decisions more clearly. You will find that you're being more peaceful, right? That's there for you to try it out for yourself.
Thank you so much, sir. We'd like to extend our heartfelt gratitude to you for gracing us with your wisdom and guiding us throughout this session. We're really, really grateful. These insightful stories have been so interesting, and I'm sure everyone has learned something from this session and taken that back with something that they'll forever remember from here. The way you explained these phenomenons, the stories, they were just really interesting, and I'd like to acknowledge that. And we understand your time is precious, and we're grateful for your generosity and taking this time out from your busy schedule to be here with us today. So thank you so much. And we'd also like to encourage all the participants to take part in the quiz related to the session. And on that note, let's congratulate all the winners of the previous quiz. So we have Aditi Gohil from Ruya Girls College, Jyoti Umesh Rai and Sumaya Muhammad Khan from Walia College of Arts and Commerce, Tulsi and Yash Patel from Thakur College, Ankit Tiwari Ramaran from Ramanaran Ruya College. Then we have Arvind Jignesh Bhanushali and Namita Amay Patel from Chembur Karnataka Law College. Rani Ramesh Bhaumik from KB College of Arts and Commerce. Hari Krishna AG, Ronak Chauhan, Madhu Gubbar and Jetwa Vae from SIES College of Commerce. Bhakti Pathare, Kaustubh Kalgutkar, Nagraj Balasaheb Tarde from Dr. Ambedkar College of Law, and Deepti Rotela from Swami Vivekanand High School and Junior College. Thank you so much for participating in the quiz. Let's just give a virtual applause to all the winners. And before we end this session, let's just all stand up for the national anthem.
जनगण मन अधिनायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता पंजाब सिंध गुजरात मराठा द्राविड उत्कल बंगा विंध्य हिमाचल यमुना गंगा उच्चल जलधि तरंगा तव शुभ नामे जागे तव शुभ आशीष मांगे गाहे तव जय गाथा जन गण मंगलदायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता जय हे जय हे जय हे जय 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 हे।
Thank you, everyone.